There are actually many versions of the Snow White story, and I'm going to tell you a couple of obscure and wild ones today. With the whole new Disney live action coming out, I thought I would share some interesting versions of the story. The German one that movie and the 1937 film are based on are the only one that has the 7 dwarves. Common denominator for all of these stories are really glass coffins, girls who somehow fall unconscious, usually because of a jealous or angry other female, and then are brought back to life after not decaying like a normal body in a glass coffin. I have another video on the Grimm brothers Snow White about how it's not a kiss that wakes her up. It actually isn't in any of these stories. And often the prince who finds her when she's unconscious is a creepy, terrible person, including the first story I'm going to tell you, the crystal casket from Italy. It starts with this widower who has a daughter, and when she's 12, he sends her to school, and she's got this female school teacher who falls in love with her dad. And every day the teacher's like, put in a good word for me with your dad, tell your dad he should marry me. And she does. And every day the dad's like, man, I don't want to get remarried. You don't want that daughter. Like, things are good how they are. But the school teacher is so persistent, and the girl keeps doing what the school teacher said. So finally, he comes and he meets her, he likes her, they get married. Big mistake. There's an Italian Cinderella that's like this too, where this woman, a governess or a teacher, pressures the girl to get the dad to marry her, and then once he does, she's terrible to her and is a evil, wicked stepmother. In this one, the stepmom treats her terribly and specifically tries to kill her by making her walk across a roof to a place where a basil plant is growing to water the basil every day, hoping she'll fall off the roof and into the river and die. One day she's out there, like on the roof trying not to die, and this eagle comes by and sees her crying and scared, and the eagle's like, what's wrong? And she's like, well, my stepmother wants to kill me and I have to do these terrible things. So the eagle's like, girl, get on my back. I'm gonna take you to people who treat you better. And she's like, okay. So she does. The eagle takes her to this crystal palace of the fairies, and the fairies just totally take her in, love her, treat her perfect, are so happy to have her, and she's happy to be there. But the eagle is super spiteful and bitter towards the stepmom. So the eagle flies back to the stepmom like a week later, and she's like, hey, stepmom, where's your daughter? And she's like, I don't know. She probably fell off the roof. I haven't seen her in 10 days. Good riddance. But then the eagle's like, I took her to the fairies and she's living a great life with them. And so the stepmom's like, oh, now I'm mad. So that's how she finds out instead of the magic mirror, the petty eagle. Instead of being a witch and trying to kill her herself, the stepmom hires a witch from the city to go and kill her. And this witch has magic that can make her look like anyone. So she makes herself look like one of the girl's father's servants and takes her some sweetmeats, some pastries. Now, like the dwarves, the fairies are out this day, and they have warned her, do not open the door to anyone. But she looks out the window and she thinks this is a familiar servant girl she knows who's bringing pastries from her dad, who has just found out where she is. So she opens the door, she eats the sweetmeats, they're poisoned, she falls down and dies. Well, dies. Fairies come home, they find her dead, they're real upset, and they're like, let's bring her back to life. And the chief of the fairies is like, no, she didn't listen to me. And they're like, please, please, please. And she's like, okay, but this is her last chance. So they like get the sweetmeats out of her throat, and she comes back to life, and they're like, don't let anyone in again. We're not gonna help you a second time. But that eagle again goes and tells the stepmom, hey, you failed, she's still alive. So the stepmom hires the witch again, and this time the witch dresses up as one of the girl's former tailors from her dad's household, and she's like, I've got this beautiful dress for you, come out so you can try it on. And she does, and as soon as she puts on the dress, it's either poison or just magical or enchanted in some way, she falls down dead. So the fairies come home, and the chief is like, true to her word, she's like, she didn't listen to me again, I'm not bringing her back to life. But she puts her in this beautiful crystal casket that is like inlaid with gold and flowers and is really beautiful. And she puts it on this magnificent horse that is greater even than the king's horse. And somehow the horse is carrying this casket on its back. And she tells the horse, don't stop unless someone says these specific words to you. Stop, for pity's sake, I have lost my horse for you. So, horse goes riding through the village. The prince on his own horse sees this and chases him. He rides so hard, the prince's own horse dies. He jumps off, continues on foot, and finally yells the magic words like, stop, I've given up my horse for you. So the horse stops for him. And when he sees the beautiful girl, he's like, I'm taking her home. Like a totally normal, healthy response. But it gets worse because he takes her home, he brings her into his bedroom, and he tells everyone, this is my wife now. His mom comes out and he literally says, Mother, I went hunting, but I have found a wife. And the mom's like, that is either a doll or a dead woman. What are you doing? And he's like, this is my wife. Don't talk about her like that. He becomes obsessed. He stays in his room with the girl in the coffin. He takes all his meals in there. He won't leave. I really, really hope all he's doing is looking at her. Really hope so. Eventually a war comes along and he's got to go fight the war. And so he tells his mom, take good care of my wife, and these 2 chambermaids are assigned to take care of her, and if they don't, I'm killing them when I come back. So the mom's like, yeah, sure, son. So he goes off to war. They totally do not take care of her. They don't even dust the coffin, it says. And so he sends word, hey, I won, I'm coming home. And the mom goes to the chambermaids and she's like, you guys were screwed. We gotta like clean her up. And they call her the doll. They're like, we have not taken proper care of the doll. So they went to his room, saw that the doll's face and hands were covered with dust and fly specks. So they took a sponge, washed her face, then they get water on her dress. So they're like, we're gonna have to change her dress. And as soon as they take her dress off, she wakes up. She's like, where am I? They tell her the whole story. She starts crying. I would too. But they are like comforting her and they're like, we're gonna put you in one of our finest dresses. So they dress her up like a queen and then they decide to play a joke on the prince. He comes home and the chambermaids fall on their knees in front of him and say, we're so sorry, we did not take care of her. She smelled so bad because she was a dying, rotting corpse that we went and buried her. Sorry. He's like, erect the gallows, and is ready to kill them. Mom comes out totally in on this too, and she's like, son, it was a dead woman. And he says, no, I will not listen to any reason. Dead or alive, you should have left it for me. But finally, the mom rings a little bell and out came the beautiful girl who is now alive and dressed up. So everyone tells him the true story of what happened. And he says, mother, I adored her when dead and called her my wife. Now I mean her to be my wife in truth. And she says, yes, my son, I am willing. They arranged a wedding and they got married, and I just hope our girl was willing too. There's another Italian one called Maria and the Seven Robbers, and it starts out kind of the same way. This girl's dad is a widower, she goes to school, the teacher is into the dad. But once the dad marries her, she's awful to the girl, and she straight up doesn't try to hide it from the dad like the previous story. She hid it from the father. This mom goes to the dad and she's like, this girl is eating us out of house and home. We need to get rid of her. And he's like, I can't kill my own child. And she's like, it's fine. We'll take her out to the woods and we'll just leave her there. It gets a little Hansel and Gretel because Maria, the girl's name, keeps bran in her pocket, and as they lead her out to the woods saying they're going on a picnic or something, she leaves a bran trail. Then he drops the loaf of bread he brought over a cliff and he's like, oh, Maria, I dropped our bread. Go down and get it. And so she does, and they run back home. But she finds her way back home following the bran trail. So she comes home, stepmom's mad, but they try it again. This time there's no bran. They make sure it's a steeper, higher cliff, and they succeed in abandoning her in the woods. Now she wanders along until she finds a house in the woods that's got 7 beds and no one's there. And when the people come home, it's not 7 dwarves, but 7 robbers. Now, because she really wants to be hospitable, or because women be cleaning, while they were gone, she cleaned everything up. And so they come home and they're amazed that their house is so clean. And then when they see her, they're like, who are you? She tells them the whole story and they're like, that's fine. We love what you did with the house. So stay with us and cook and clean for us and be our mother slash servant slash maid, and we won't hurt you. And it specifically says they think of her as a little sister, so that we know that they don't have any sexual designs for her. That's one of the reasons why the dwarf story is the dwarf story. She's not sexually threatened by living with 7 men if they're dwarves, and apparently these robbers too. So the way she gets found out in this one isn't an eagle, it's like this gossipy peasant woman who stops by the house and sees she's still alive and goes and tells the stepmom. So the stepmom tries to kill her 3 times again, eventually succeeds by getting her to put on a ring that is magic or poisoned, and she falls down dead. The robbers put her in a glass coffin, but they want someone else to find her and take care of her, but they're robbers, so they don't want to go talk to the law, so they just go and leave her in the stables of the king, hoping that someone will take care of her, like you would dump someone at the ER if they got hurt doing something illegal with you and you don't want the cops involved. When the prince finds her again, he falls in love with her, won't leave her, takes her out of the coffin, keeps her in his room, weeping with candles, until the mom finally intervenes and she's like, dude, this isn't healthy. So she sees the ring on the girl's hand and she's like, well, she's a corpse, she doesn't need it, takes the ring off, and she comes back to life. Everyone's happy, they get married, and I bet the queen was just like, yeah, we'll keep this ring over here. Who knows why she came back to life? I don't know. Last thing I want to tell you is an apparent legend from Switzerland about the death of the 7 dwarves. If you wondered, they've got 7 beds. Where does Snow White sleep? In this one, she sleeps in the bed of the oldest one. And when a peasant woman knocks on the door and she sees that this girl is living with 7 men and sleeping in one of their beds, she assumes she must be sleeping with them. She goes and gets a bunch of men who come and kill all the dwarves, as they buried the bodies outside in the garden and burned the house to the ground, and no one knows what became of the girl. Charming! My book Dust Spells is a reimagining of the 12 Dancing Princesses, but there's consent. Check out my podcast too, link in the bio.